We're in the midst of a healthcare revolution. Digital health is breaking down barriers for patients and providers, changing the way we do business, regulate healthcare reimbursement, and deliver care. From telemedicine solutions to medical devices to AI to innovations we can't even name yet. It's taken years of dedication from innovative leaders to pursue healthcare progress. How did we get here? What's around the corner for digital health? Let's find out together in Trailblazing with Digital Health Pioneers.
Welcome to Trailblazing with Digital Health Pioneers. I'm Dale Vandermark, a partner in the McDermott, Will & Emery Digital Health Practice, and joining me today is Liz Rockett. Liz is a managing director at Kaiser Permanente Ventures, a national leader in strategic venture investing in healthcare. Liz has over 2 decades of experience in the healthcare industry and is focused on venture investing within health IT, digital health, and tech-enabled services sectors. Prior to joining KP Ventures in 2015, Liz served as the Director for Health Impact Investing at Imprint Capital Advisors. Liz, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So Liz, to get started, why don't you give us a little bit of a background in terms of how you decided to move to KP Ventures?
Sure. So as you mentioned, my work just before joining Kaiser Permanente was in impact investing at Imprint Capital, and had done some interesting work in that space, just understanding sort of how folks who had some sort of mission interest as well as a desire for a financial return of some sort were looking at US health and healthcare, which is where my whole career has been. And I joined that effort really believing that this was a way to bring about some of the changes that we need in US healthcare and in the health of US communities. Learned a lot there, and ultimately, in making that hop, that firm was getting acquired into another larger organization, and it was a moment for me to consider where my path was headed, and decided, as I met the team at Kaiser Permanente Ventures, it's a really special organization that really holds that mission of Kaiser Permanente as the lens through which we look at the world of venture capital, the lens through which we look at opportunities for investment. So for me, it was a little bit of the best of both worlds, of both a committed fund that's looking to do good from a financial return perspective, be a strong venture fund, but also really uphold a 75-year-old mission, a really important organization's vision of what healthcare can be. So knitting those two together is what brought me over.
Well, that's a really fascinating topic. It's one that we don't generally, I think, see when we talk to investors, that element of healthcare that is mission driven. Usually, of course, investors are looking out for a return on investment. How do you find marrying those two, I'll call it missions within your investment fund working out? Is it everything that you've hoped it would be?
Yeah, so it's, and I do think it's interesting. I think the folks who invest, venture investors, many people are drawn to venture capital because they want to change things, because they want to be part of something new and drive things for change. And many people do get into venture because they believe that that change will create good in the world. Obviously, the reality of venture capital is such that "and make returns" tends to become more of the lead of that sentence than the follow for many places. But I do find in healthcare venture, there is that perspective of we're investing in things that are going to change things, and that's going to be for the better. From the perspective of doing this work within the Kaiser Permanente context, what's been really valuable to me is I joke all the time that Liz should not tell anybody within a clinical practice what change is needed. I should be informed by, right? So my interest in investing on behalf of KP is very much let my investments, let where this capital goes to be instructed by and informed by those who are actually trying to work within the paradigms that we have today and who know what would be beneficial. And that, that wisdom comes from a lot of different places within the healthcare system. But that's kind of the promise of the fund. Now, to your question of what does that actually look like? Because there are those twin objectives. We have both the objective of making a financial return, and in the 25-year history, just about, or about 24 years in, but in the history of this fund, we have done quite well financially, and we're really proud of our returns, and we do all those things of benchmarking ourselves against Cambridge data and all those things to understand, are we performing well? Is this working as a venture fund? Should it just be an innovation effort, or does it hold merit as a venture fund? So we pay very close attention to that. And that guides a lot of our, I would say, final decision in terms of when you're looking at various deals and getting to the place of are we or aren't we going to go forward and make an investment. A lot of that financial focus is first and front and center at that stage. Before we ever get there is where that strategic interest and that mission interest shows up. So I look at it as sort of often a first line screen on the world, right? That we're only going to be looking at folks who are building in a way that is in keeping with the spirit and mission of Kaiser Permanente. And then, of course, the role of venture capital is to get involved with those companies over the life of the company. And often we find ourselves, speaking on the boards or as part of the investor syndicate, not just as returns interested shareholders, but also as stakeholders who are interested in the broader impact of the company and what it is meant to do. We hope that that's a great benefit to the entrepreneurs that we work with, who often themselves come to wanting to start a company because they want to see some change, and having that mix in the boardroom is really important.
Well, that's so true with a lot of healthcare entrepreneurs that we engage with as well, that it starts from a mission perspective as opposed to I'm going to build $1 billion company, and that happens to be in this sector. And that strikes me as a really good way to go, casting that larger net from a mission perspective, and then having your financial returns perspective really drive the ultimate decision making at the end of the day. One question following on that, though, in terms of your engagement with your entrepreneurs, how much of that ties back to Kaiser Permanente, and how much benefit do those entrepreneurs really get from that association that you have there?
Yeah, so corporate venture funds in healthcare exist on kind of a spectrum of how closely tied into their corporate parent they are versus how kind of tethered or a little bit with more room to roam. The Kaiser Permanente Ventures function has been set up, especially because many of the other corporate venture funds are tied to health plans, or often device or drug companies, where there's a little bit more of that like very crisp and clear business interest, and also a natural separation from clinical care. As a provider-led organization, we would never want the interests of the venture fund, which is also in perspective of Kaiser Permanente, to drive the decisions of our clinicians, right? That's not the intent, structure, or sort of like what we're up to with this fund. But what we do want is, when we've done the work of diligence of understanding, sort of we've met a company, we've been looking into a sector, we are learning from our colleagues within Kaiser Permanente of the importance of what a particular company is doing, that we're getting that positive feedback that this product, this service, this offering is something that we've been looking for. It's something that's going to change how we work. It's something that is valuable for various reasons. When we have those sorts of insights internally, and we do ultimately invest in the company, our work then becomes making sure that Kaiser Permanente is a very federated organization, right? It is a very broad organization, and at times it can be hard for information to flow. And so many people within our organization work to make sure that that we are able to sort of exchange things well, but we're also aware that it doesn't always happen. And so can the venture fund be a force for making sure that information is flowing and that folks are meeting and hearing from each other of what is working and that sort of thing? So that is often the role that we're playing internally with our portfolio companies, is making sure, you've been doing this great work in our Northwest region. Are the folks in Southern California aware of that? Because we've just heard from another group that the group in Southern California is struggling with an issue related to it. They may not ultimately decide to go in the same way that our Northwest region has gone, but let us make sure that you're at least getting that sort of warm introduction and connection. And so a lot of that connective tissue work, as we like to say, is what we end up doing, as opposed to, we don't come with a contract, and that is not a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, the contract is coming. We genuinely, the investments are not linked to contracts. And so the work tends to be a little bit more of that informal relationship building work that's so important in an organization like ours.
It sounds very dynamic, and it sounds like the value that Kaiser Permanente as a whole gets from Kaiser Permanente Ventures goes well beyond the investment, the return on the investment, and really goes to improving internal communications, as well as perhaps even finding, the next best thing to deploy.
It's certainly our hope and our intention to be part of that. There's so many functions within Kaiser Permanente that are meant to be creating and do create that connective tissue within our organization, and we want to be part of that. The unique work that we get to do within a health system like ours is to be outward facing with an internal ear. And there are very few folks within our organization who get to have that be their sole focus. And so we take that as a great privilege.
Working with teams is fantastic, absolutely. I'd like to go back and just return to this notion of mission in healthcare a little bit. Obviously, healthcare is filled with all sorts of organizations, lots of nonprofits, particularly on the provider side, for-profit. And one of those areas that I've thought over the years would be picking up a little bit more are these hybrid organizations, the B Corps, the 3 LLCs, those that try to marry public benefit with private investment. Have you seen the growth in these types of programs or efforts in your work?
Yeah, it's such an interesting area, and I think Dale, you and I have talked about just the impact that this both the COVID pandemic and all the societal change that's been unfolding over the last couple of years has had on all parts of our industry, including entrepreneurship, including what are folks thinking when they start a business, how they want to structure that, what they want to get up to. We just made our first investment in this past year in a public benefit corporation, a company called Everytable. I'm really proud of this. I think it's something that, the public benefit corporation, this is a non-lawyer speaking, you can correct me if I mess this up, but the way I think of it is you take the corporate form, that traditional focus on creating shareholder value, and you plant at the heart of that an agreement by all parties that there is a mission that will not be messed with, right, for any purpose. So in this case with Everytable, they are looking to provide access to fresh, healthy, prepared food at a very low price point. And so the mission that's at the heart of it is to create broad-ranging access to fresh, healthy food at an affordable price point. And so anything that we do in thinking about how this company is going to grow is going to hold that sacred. The vision of the CEO, Sam Polk, who's an incredible spokesperson for just why the mission matters for building this type of company and the strength of company that he wants to build. He, sort of articulates what I think is really exciting about this different corporate form, which is we can all hold that as a common focus as we build an incredibly strong company. So it means taking on something that might be a little bit harder, but with a lot of intentionality and just shared focus on it. I think that there's more good work to do, but it fits into what's just been happening over these last couple of years as I've been observing the market and just sort of how we're hearing from different entrepreneurs of what they want to get up to and what they're struggling with, right? I think we're seeing the power of the entrepreneur, the CEO, that leadership team who says, hey, we had a broader vision at the start of this, and we're narrowing ourselves to fit into that growth path, which that may be valuable, but are we over limiting ourselves because of a more narrow focus strictly on shareholder value? And I think that, this is certainly hearkening back to my impact investing work and those days, but part of the reason that I left impact investing when I did was because it was still very nascent in healthcare. And that was shocking to me, right? Like in healthcare, we have so much need. And to your point, there are great organizations working in a nonprofit model that might struggle to get access to capital. There's great ideas that end up going into the for-profit model that then limit themselves of what they actually tackle in terms of the issues that we have as a system. There's plenty of space in the middle. And so kind of I think this may be an area where we need the entrepreneurs to lead and pound the table. And there are capital sources that could show up and operate in different ways to respond to that, which I think is very exciting.
Capital and also hopefully revenue as well. I mean, we've talked many times when it comes to digital health, the struggle that many organizations may have because of the reimbursement system. And I think the example that you just talked about is a really interesting one for a couple of reasons. One is it is not a subject that we traditionally think of as healthcare, right? Good nutrition, certainly something we should all be thinking about, but is traditionally outside of the scope of what we traditionally think of as healthcare. And as you know from our conversations, I'm a big fan of thinking about those things because so much impacts our health. But those last few comments that you made, I think are really quite interesting. Asking, in a sense, our entrepreneurs to lead the way and perhaps even forego the apparent growth strategy that may be available to them to provide a service that is currently lacking, right? Or provide a service to address an issue that isn't being addressed in as an effective a manner as it might, and taking that longer path to change the system in a sense through that process. I think we're beginning to see more of that. And I hope that this sort of impact investing, I'll call it social investing, however we want to describe it, I think could be a really good avenue for those sorts of things because it really does wed together the mission and long-term a business as well as positive change to the structure that we have in healthcare. But let's turn quickly to digital health. I know we've been talking kind of around it quite a bit. You know, digital health has seen a lot of growth over the years, a lot of certainly growth in investing, and certainly the pandemic has given a booster shot to at least some versions of digital health that are out there, and we've seen a tremendous amount of investment dollars flowing into digital health, into virtual care. Is there something different right now than, say, 2 or 3 years ago, pre-pandemic, about the interest in digital health? Or is this a continuation of what I would call perhaps a bit of hype as well as rational, decision making?
I laugh because so many of our conversations, Dale, over the years have been discussing this hype in all of its various forms. And honestly, it harkens back to what you were saying just before in regards to companies that are thinking about the impact that they want to have and how to achieve that. I am still very much a pragmatist of we've got to find the revenue, right? That still has to be a North Star in the world of health innovation and digital health. And just the reality of sort of how we work. I think it's something that healthcare innovators take on something different than a traditional tech innovator in terms of how are you going to get paid is a trickier question in our industry. And you have to take it pretty seriously. Because when I think about what's changed, this is part of it, right? So all of those entrenched interests in healthcare that are the gatekeepers for the lion's share of spend in healthcare, who have been dancing with in various ways digital health innovations, and the joke has been made more times than we need to count of just like, what is digital health at this point? Is it not just healthcare? Because isn't everything that we're doing some way digitally enabled? So I would say, what's exciting about this moment and what I do feel is different, and I've been, as we were talking about, in this industry now for coming on 20 years, not over 20 years yet. Don't go aging me too fast. I'm just about there. And And there has been a lot of hype and a lot of promise and a lot of excitement around, okay, technology has taken over all these other industries. It's coming, and there are these people who are, they're going to bring it to us, and it's going to be great. And there's interest, and then fizzle, right? There was just like this, didn't quite materialize. And this period feels very different. And I think that is in part because the leaders of what I often call entrenched interests, but our health plans, our provider groups, all different folks who are part of all different parts of our value chain have had to look at, we have to bring this digital. It has to become virtual. It's the only way to deliver this service. And that has rippled, that broader scale is some of just like the difference that I'm feeling of this moment of, you're seeing players as customers who have a broader scale to sort of let digital health grow to more of its promise, which is what we've all been waiting for. And now, the exciting part of this moment is we've got the interest, we've got a lot more revenue flowing through this sector. We certainly have a lot more capital flowing through this sector. And we're hopefully going to start to see what this industry can do with that wind in its sails. So I'm really excited about these, the next 2, 3, 5 years that are coming. I think we're going to see just a next level of both innovation, creation of access, understanding of what benefits can be, and partnership between what has long been, sort of the digital health, what's the right word, sort of the movement coming for the mainstream. What I'm seeing, and I'm hoping will continue, is much more of a partnership and an understanding across that aisle of what's the reality in operating today, what's the potential, and how can we actually merge those two well. I think both sides are ready. So
that's a very interesting comment. It raises in my mind a number of questions around the infrastructure that's needed to really embrace what technology has to offer in healthcare. There's clearly the infrastructure required in order for people to have access. But of course, in healthcare, when you're dealing with so many different organizations involved in any single encounter, a payer, a provider, perhaps multiple providers, the infrastructure questions become much, much deeper. And I'm wondering whether, because we've seen, of course, as well, many of the same things that you see, with the increased interest in the payer community, primarily, who of course have a vested interest in the care that is delivered and the quality of care that is delivered, together with the, I'll call them blue chip technology companies that are now interested in healthcare, and increasingly. Do you see the potential for some significant shifts in infrastructure, the way, for example, we saw when meaningful use was first adopted to promote electronic medical records? Are we seeing yet perhaps another significant turn for everybody in healthcare toward some new approach to infrastructure?
We're in a very different moment now, but some of the fundamentals that I think our tech brethren assume of course, you'll share data with us. Everybody shares data with us. We keep it basically safe. What's the big deal? And that just doesn't fly. It just doesn't fly. It's too easy to say no to, for some good and some bad reasons, but it's too easy to say no to. And so I think, where so much of the promise of technology is not just the ability to do a video visit, and is so much more about the intelligent uses of data and how that can really transform my experience of care as a patient, a clinician's experience of caring for patients, all of that. There's still a lot of locked up promise there that I don't think we've yet seen how to unlock. I think it's a worthy thing to keep engaged in. I'm not ready to declare that I've seen both sides willing to engage in good faith, but that is what it will take. That both sides are genuinely, and says both sides meaning traditional healthcare players and folks who bring that sort of technology to bear, coming to the fore and saying, we want to hear the other side, and we have the intention of building something that really serves us both. That haven't seen it yet. I believe that it is possible. I believe that it is necessary. But when I think about big tech and healthcare, that's the stumbling block that I feel like we just keep watching people trip over again and again.
It's a tough one, and it seems to be universal. I mean, we've seen some of those starts and stops outside of the United States as well. We've also seen outside of the United States some very significant efforts where there's different privacy infrastructure, different cultural attitude toward privacy that maybe allows for different approaches that we haven't tried in the United States. That's an interesting perspective on kind of that infrastructure. It's kind of like the artificial intelligence discussions, right? We have to find those levers of trust that we can figure out how to pull to get everybody comfortable. Yeah, I'd like to, before we end, just turn to a topic you and I have talked about from time to time on and off over the years, which has been the lack of women in positions of real authority in a lot of organizations. Have you seen with digital health and with some of the ventures that you've taken a look at, have you seen an increase in the number of women entering into the market, or is that an issue that still requires a lot more attention and focus?
I really wish that I had the good news, good news moment to share right here. It has been really interesting for me as a woman rising in this industry to sort of watch the different paths of my male and female colleagues and just sort of how folks are received, what backgrounds and temperaments are rewarded and all that sort of thing. There is definitely just a total dearth of both female investors as well as female CEOs. I know for my own fund, we've been really proud of the fact that for the last 5 years at least, we've been 50-50 split straight, sort of bottom to top on our investment and broader venture team. There are some truly incredible women in the digital health industry, both on the venture and on the CEO or executive leadership side. But it remains a challenge where, to me, it feels a little bit like we are not immune because we are doing the work of healthcare, where there are so many women who are executives in various forms, in various places in healthcare. That doesn't just translate over to the venture and entrepreneurial ecosystem, unfortunately. And so we have just a lot of work to do. This is, one more reason I'm grateful to get to do some of this work within Kaiser Permanente. Kaiser Permanente has sort of clear what does not look like me mean, whether that's, gender, race, ability, disability, right? Sort of all the different categories that we think of as a care provider come into play there. But I think that that sort of thinking is what we are still very much in need of. And as a venture fund, we get, to make these decisions that will help to transform companies as well as our industry. So it's an area that I don't have a great, here's the results, we've already fixed it, but we certainly are focused on it. And I really appreciate the question.
Oh, absolutely. It's something we focus on ourselves quite a bit, and it is a journey for sure. But hopefully, with us all working on it together, we will continue to see progress, because I do think we have been seeing some progress, not as much perhaps as we would like to see, but we'll certainly keep up our efforts along with you. Well, Liz, thank you so much for joining us today to share your thoughts in digital health. And everyone, to learn more about KP Ventures investment in the future of healthcare, visit kpventures.com. And to learn how McDermott can help you transform healthcare delivery, visit mwe.com/digital health.